Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to highlight duplicate values in a range. Before we do that, go to excelvbasequel.com and there's a ton of hours of video. You could enter your email here and receive an email when there are free videos uploaded. Also contact me here and I'll answer your questions. Okay, so let's get started. So let's consider a data set like this where we have a name of an item, an invoice number for that item, and a price for that item. So this is a radio, has an invoice number and a price of $1. And then a watch has an invoice number and a price of $2, and so on. And we have three items: radio, watch, and shoes. And we repeat those items. So all I did was copy this and then paste it here and paste it here. And what that creates is a duplicate set of values. This row, radio 422 $1, is a duplicate of this row, and it's a duplicate of this row. And that is a duplicate because these three fields are the same for that row, and so on and so forth. So watch is a duplicate here and here and here. Now if I change the price here to just go 1, 2, and 3, and I copy this down, then I don't have any duplicates in this range because the price is unique. It goes from 1 to 9, and radio 422, that combination of name and invoice, they all have different prices. So this one has $1, and then this one, radio 422, has $4, and radio 422 has $7. So what we're concerned with today is how to highlight duplicates in a range. So in this case, we wouldn't highlight any duplicates. Let me show you something that Microsoft Excel offers that does deal with duplicates. So I could do something like this. I could go to the Data tab. I could go to Remove Duplicates here, and I could go expand the selection. Just because I put my cursor on a cell in this range, it knows what selection I'm talking about. So when I go to this Remove Duplicates form, I can select columns to specify what columns I consider to be involved in the duplicate scenario. So in this case, if I select all the columns, that means name, invoice, and price, they all have to be unique, or else it will delete rows. So if I click OK here, it says no duplicates values found. Okay, that's cool. That's because of the combinations of name, invoice, and price, there is no overlap. But if I change this to 1, now if I do the same thing and I go OK, it should say that there's one duplicate, which is this radio 422 $1 down here. So I click OK. It says 1 duplicate values found and removed, 8 remaining. So this functionality will find a duplicate and it will remove it, and that's cool. But in our case, we want to do the same sort of thing, only we want to highlight the duplicate. So how do we do that? Let me put that radio back in. I'm just going to copy this here. Okay, so now we have a duplicate here, right? So I already wrote the code for this, and we're going to step through it line by line, but I just want to show you when I run it that it highlights the duplicate. Okay, let me real quick put a button on here. So I went to Developer, Insert, ActiveX Controls. I'll put a button. I'm just going to double click the button, and I'm going to go to the module where I wrote the code, and I'm just going to do this, call that. So I'm just going to call the function so that it's easier for me to run the procedure. and then I'm just going to rename this caption highlights. And okay, so now we have something where I could click a button and it'll highlight a duplicate. And if again, radio 422 invoice 1 is a duplicate here. If I change this to 4 and I run this again, then there is no duplicate. If I change shoes has radio, it has shoes 4432 $3. If I change this to $3 down here, then there's a duplicate. And if I change this to $3 again, then there's another duplicate. And so on and so forth. I could do this with multiple items like this, and it's just going to continue to highlight the duplicates. If I do it like the original, and I just copy this 3 times, then everything should be highlighted, and it is, because they're all duplicates. They all have duplicates. If I make them unique by changing the price for every one of them to be different, and the easiest way to do that is just to drag this down, then if I highlight, there are no duplicates. Okay, so we see that this code works. We see that that to find a duplicate, it can do that. So let's talk about it. Let's say, what are we doing? So I go to my module here. It's in module 2, and what do I have going on here? So what we want to do initially in the code is to say, if well, actually, let me explain it on the worksheet first. What we're going to do is we are going to declare a range that is going to be in column B here, and the range is going to depend on how many items we have in column B. So if we have 9 items like this, the range will be exactly what I have highlighted. It will be from B2 to B10. If we have 15 items, it will be from B2 to B15. So the range we declare is going to be dynamic, and it's going to move like this, depending on how big our range is, how many values are in column B. So we're going to set that up. And once we set that up, once we have a range like this, we're going to do a loop that is going to go through every cell in this range. It's just going to go here through B2, and then it's going to go to B3, and that's going to go to B4, and it's going to look at this value, whatever the value is in that cell, and it's going to do that for every cell. And at each loop, at each time through the loop, it's going to first get a count of how many other instances there are of that value in the range. So for instance, it's going to look at 422, and it's going to say how many instances of 422 are there in this range that I have highlighted, and it's going to count. It's actually going to say how many instances are there of 422 in the entire range, and it's going to be 3, because here we have one, and here we have one, and here we have one. And then it's going to use that number 3 to perform find functions, and it's going to say, okay, if I have 3 values in this range, I want to highlight, I want to find duplicates of 422. So I know that there are 3 422s in this range. I'm going to perform 2 searches, because I already know that I could consider this unique. So all I need to do is do 2 more searches, one to find this value and one to find this value. And that's what it does. It'll find this value, this instance of 422, and it'll say, and then it'll look to the left and to the right, and it'll build a string, and the string is going to contain all this data, and it's going to say, is all this data equal to, what was up here, all this data? And if it was, then it's going to highlight these cells and highlight these cells. And then it's going to do the next search, the second search, and do the same thing. It's going to find this. It's going to say, is all this data equal to all this data, and if it is, it highlights it. So if that's confusing, I apologize. It sort of is, could be better explained, but let's step through this. So here in the code, I declared a range variable here. I declared a search result because we're going to use the find function. We're going to be searching for something. I declared a variable called nCell, which is going to be used to declare the dynamic array. I declare a variable called address of the search, and this is going to be used to find, okay, this is a search result, and here's the address, B5. Once I have the address, I can look to the right and to the left and build that string to say, is all this value, is all that data equal to all this data? So that's what that variable is for. Then I have a start address, which is going to be just for demonstration purposes to show you that at each time through the loop, our start address is going to be B2, and then it's going to be B3 and B4 and B5 and so on. And then a variable here called big string. Now big string is a string variable that will hold the data that we consider a duplicate. So in our case, we have 3 columns, and my big string is basically going to be this. It's going to be this value, and I'm going to append what's to the left of it and what's to the right of it, and this is what's going to be my big string. So if I copy this down, you could think about this as, this is just a string that contains data for a row. And if you have 15 columns or 10 columns, you could do the same thing. You could just append more data to it. And I'm going to do this in code, but I'm just showing you now in the worksheet. It's a string that I can use to say, is all this data in these cells equal to something that I want to identify as a duplicate? So for instance here, 422 radio 1 is just a big string that I can use to compare versus another big string. And so that's how we're going to do this comparison and search for duplicates. Let me clear this. And let's go back here. So now we have all our variables set up. And initially what I said is, as we step through, we'll see I want to declare this dynamic range here in column B. And I do that right here. I do that by saying if range B2 is blank, then set this nCell, which is a string, equal to 2. And if it's not, set it to the row of XL down. So that will give me a value in the nCell that will be the last row in this range. And I can use that to then set me up a range. If I run this, right now this range, what this line did is I removed all the colors from the range, and I did that by saying range A2 to C and then nCell. And remember, nCell comes from this variable, which is the last row in this range. I do dot interior dot pattern dot equals XL none. So that will eliminate the color from here. And then I set my range equal to range B2 to B, in our case 10. So this is setting the range. And now I have a range that looks like this in the computer's memory, from B2 to B10. That's what I have right now. And now we can loop through each of these cells in the range. And let me just pull this down a bit. So you can see this is all the code we're going to go through. It's not very long, but you have to sort of understand what's going on. This is a loop that starts here. It's a for loop that loops through each cell in this range, RNG. Remember, RNG is this range here. It's going to loop through each of these cells in the range. And next thing is what I mentioned before, is I have a variable here called x, which just holds the number of instances of what is in the range of how many times this value 422 is in this range. So this returns 3. So 422 is here and here and here. So this is going to be 3, the value of x. So if I step through, it's going to be 3, but notice that I subtract 1. And I subtract 1 because I want to search a number of times. I don't want to search 3 times, I want to search 2 times. But let me show you. In memory, if I do a watch on this, x is equal to 2 down here, right here, x is equal to 2. And what this did is say x is equal to the worksheet function dot countif columns to our cell minus 1. So again, all this is doing is it's looking at our cell, and our cell is 422 the first time through the loop. Because our cell, you could just think of our cell as the first cell in this range, which is 422. Okay, so now I have a count of how many times our cell, or 422, is in here. Now I want to do something. I want to say only if x is greater than 0, then do something. And why do I do that? Because I know that if the worksheet function countif, if this line here returns a value of 1, I'm always going to subtract, I always subtract 1 from it. So that's going to give me 0. And what that means is that there's only one instance of this invoice in this range. So I don't need to do anything because I know in no way can that be a duplicate. So that's what I say here in this comment. I say if there's only one instance, then it is not a duplicate. So move on. Next, if there are more than one instance in the range, then I want to do something. I want to start checking if it's a duplicate. And I do that here. First of all, I define my duplicate by saying big string, which is a string variable. I set that to whatever's in my cell here, our cell, which is 422. I set big string equal to that plus what is to the right of it, which is here, and what is to the left of it, which is here. This is basically doing what I did before, which is, this plus, it's doing exactly this. It's doing this, what's to the right of it, plus what's to the left of it. It does that, only in code. So if I step through this now, I look at big string in memory, I get 4221 radio, which is exactly what you see here. It's doing exactly this. Okay? Now, when I have that, I use that to hold it in memory because I'm going to use it down here to say when I search for something, is that going to qualify as a duplicate? And we'll get to that in a second. The next thing, all I want to show you is for demonstration purposes, is that I declared a variable start ADD, and this is just going to be the address of this R cell variable here. So I just want to do that for demonstration purposes to show you that start ADD in memory is B2, and that B2 is right here, 422. Okay, B2 right here. That's what I'm working with right now. I'm working with the value of cell B2. Okay, so now we have a lot. We have a loop that is going through every cell here. We have a big string that's going to hold, this data in memory. And now we can perform our search. So our search is going to be using this find function here. And remember what I said before, we need to know how many times we're going to search, and that value comes from x. So we create another loop. Here's a for loop here, and this for loop goes for x count, and I didn't declare this variable, but I'm not going to declare it right now just because I don't need to. It's variant right now, so I assume that you can declare this, or actually, I'll just declare it because sometimes, in these demonstration videos, I don't declare everything, but I should. So dim x count as integer. Okay, so this is an integer variable, that I use in this for loop. And initially I set the value to 1. And notice that x here is going to be equal to 2. So what I'm going to do is search 2 times. Now watch what happens. So the first time I search, I set this search result, which is a variable I declared up here. It's a range variable. I set this range variable search result equal to the find function. But what is this find function being used on? It's being used on this range variable. And remember, this range variable is up here. It's just B2 to B10. So what we're saying is do a find over this range. And what do we want to find? We want to find our cell. Our cell in our case is 422. When do we want to search after? We want to search after the search result. Well, search result, this is why this line is important. When we initialize the search result, we set it to our cell. So that means this search after means our first search is going to end up with B5 here. That's why we initialized the search result equal to our cell the first time, so that we can put it in the after parameter here of this find function. And then these other parameters, look in the XL values, look at the whole part of the cell, search by the rows, search direction, XL next, and match case false. So that's the end of the find function. Those parameters, there's a lot of them. It could get tricky when you try to type it out and you might do stuff. I would say just follow this video closely, and I'll go over each one of these just briefly so I can stay on the screen so you could see it. It's rng.find what I want to find the R cell after search result, and then look in XL values, look at XL whole, search order, XL by rows, search direction, XL next, match case is equal to false. So those are the parameters for the find function. I'm not going to go into detail of them, but just know that what's going on here. The most important parameter are what do you want to find and when do you want to start searching for it, after what point, and we want to search after the initial cell, which we declare up here. So that's why this line is important, to initialize the search result range equal to this R cell. Okay, so now we could search. So let's step into this. It'll get clear as we go on. So I set search result equal to the find function, and now I have this variable add of search. And if I step through that, you'll see if I put a watch on this, that add of search is equal to B5. What that's saying is it searched for 422 and it found it in B5. Okay, that's great. And now we're going to do what I said before. We're going to do an if statement that says if big string, and remember big string comes from up here, which is this value here. This is big string right now, 4221 radio. It's saying if big string is equal to the range of the add of search result, address of search result. Notice address of search result is an address. So when you put that in the range function and you do dot value, you can append it just the way we did this. B2, C2, A2. These are just ranges that I'm appending. I could do the same thing with the address of the search result. I could turn that into a range because it's an address. So I do range address of search result dot value and range address of search result dot offset 01. So I'm doing the same thing that I did up here for this big string. Only now, instead of the range that I'm using, instead of it being R cell, the range I'm using is this range address of search. And I'm saying if big string is equal to, you could consider this another big string, because it's just checking is whatever I search for to the left and to the right, does all this data equal 4221 radio? And I append the same data that I did up here for big string, and I say then if it is equal to big string, then I do this. I want to highlight the background color of this range, and I want to highlight the background color of this range. So I have 6 cells that I want to highlight the background color of, these 3 and these 3, because I want to say, okay, I'm highlighting them because they're duplicates. To do that, you use this, when you're dealing with a union of ranges. I do this with statement, and here's the with statement. So let's first see that, okay, we fell into this loop, or we fell into this if statement, because big string does indeed equal the range of the address of the search. And remember, address of search is B5. So everything to the right of here going out this way, it's all that is saying is, let me highlight that again, going out this way towards the right, all that's saying is B5 here is my address of the search. I look to the right and I append something. I look to the left and then I append that, and I get the same value as what you see up here, and this is big string. So it's saying, is big string, which is this, equal to this and this and this? And it is. It absolutely is. So you fall into the true area of the if statement, and then you can highlight. You can create a union of cells of those 6 cells, and that's what I do here. I do union, and then in parentheses you put union this range, comma this range here. And what I'm doing essentially here is taking the search result cells, which are these 3 cells, address of search, then to the left of it and to the right of it, here's those 3 cells. I'm unioning those with the original cells, the R cell that I started with. Here's to the left of it and to the right of it, and here's the one I started with, R cell. Here's to the right of it, and here's to the left of it. So now I have 6 cells that I union together, and I go dot interior with this with statement. If I do dot interior and then dot color equals 65535, this is going to highlight the instance found and the original cells because they are duplicates. So essentially what I'm doing is, here I'll press step through, and there you could see it highlighted those 6 cells. Essentially what I did though was I went here and I unioned this cell and this cell and this cell and this cell and this cell. So I put them in a union function, and that just basically combines them into one range so that you could do stuff with it. And I wanted to change the color, so I did dot color is equal to 65535, and then you could just end your with, and you could do end, and then you do end if. Okay, so now we found a first duplicate, and now so now x is equal to 2 because I did next x count, right? And remember, this is a for loop that goes from x count equal to 1 to 2. So this is the second search of the 422. So I'm still here. I haven't moved yet to cell B3. I'm still here in 422, and I searched for it once, and now I'm going to search for it again because I know from my COUNTIF function up here that there are additional instances of 422. So as I search for this, I get an address of search here that is now B8. You could see that in memory from this line here. When I search for it, I set search result equal to the value of the find function, and then I pull the address out. I do search result.address. Well, and I put it into address of search, and the address of search variable holds B8, and B8 here again is 422. So now I do the same thing. I'm at B8, and I check, is big string, which is up here, 4221 radio, is that equal to a range address of search? So this is range b8.value, and then range b8.offset 01. So look to the right of b8. So now I look here, and I append it, and then I append this also to the left of it here. So that's what this is doing. It's appending things to each other. So here's range B8, and then here's range B8 offset 1 column, and then offset -1 column all the way out here. This is offset -1 column. I say, is big string equal to this value here, the value of B8 plus these things appended to it? And watch, if I step through, this should be no, right? Because 4221 radio is not going to equal 4227 radio. So I step through, and it doesn't. It's not going to qualify as a duplicate. So then I end if. I go to xcount. Let's put a watch on this. Xcount is now 3, and so that is going to not go back into this for loop. I end the if. Now I go to my next R cell. So if I go up here, R cell now, let me go down a little bit. R cell dot address here is now B3. So now I'm here. I'm at B3, and I'm going to perform the same exact algorithm that we just saw. I'm going to first count how many instances of 344 there are in this column, and there's going to be 3 instances. I subtract 1. Right here. So I count the instances of 344. I subtract 1. That puts x is equal to 2 again. And then I check if x is greater than 0, because in only that case do I want to do something. And then I set my big string. In this case, big string is going to be equal to 344 to watch, and that's what you see here, 344 to watch. Or I could just copy this down. So this is big string now, and now I search again, and I go, basically I'm going to do the same algorithm. I go, okay, I'm going to search multiple times, and at every time I'm going to basically do this. This is pretty much the most important part of the code. It checks that is big string equal to what you find and things appended to it. And if it is, then turn the color yellow. So in this case, if I step through this, big string here is 344 2 watch. The first time 344 5 watch, it's not going to be highlighted. The second time it's not going to be highlighted either. Well, actually, let me go in here and change this to 2 so you could see this will be highlighted. So if I step through again, now I'm searching again for 344, and I find my address of my search, which is going to be B9, which is what you see here, B9. And then it does actually big string equal what is in B9 plus 2 watch, right? So this should highlight it, and it does indeed fall into the if statement, and it does indeed highlight the duplicate. And then I end the with, and I keep going. And now I go to x count is 3. It falls out of that for loop, and I go to the next cell, which is going to be this cell here, B4. So you could see that this is pretty useful code if you ever want to identify duplicates. It uses the concept of appending data to other data to identify duplicates with multiple columns. I mean, the cool thing about this is that when you do this big string, the values don't have to be right next to each other. They could be multiple columns away. So this price could be over here in column G, and there could be other columns in here. But to determine a duplicate, I could I could identify that by doing, A plus B plus G instead. And in code, to do that, you would just use this offset here. You would do offset, X number of columns. So you're not confined by any structuring of the columns on your worksheet. It's doing the same sort of thing that this algorithm does. It offers you the ability to select columns to include, to say, is it a duplicate or not? That's basically exactly what you're doing when you set up something like this in your code to say, here's what I am defining as a duplicate. And that's why I put in this comment, I put, this is what we define a duplicate to be. We define a duplicate to be, the value of this plus this appended plus this appended. Now you could have 15 columns that define it to be a duplicate, and they could be separated by, other columns all over the place. So that's why this is powerful, because it could be very dynamic. You can based on the structure of the worksheet, you can offset things and say, okay, I want to include this column and that column. Like, I didn't need to do all 3 of these. I could only have done 2 of them, or even 1 of them. So that's why it's pretty dynamic code. And then just to sum up the video, what other things are important? We already know that this is pretty much the most important line of the code. Big string is equal to this range plus that appended. This, use a with statement to highlight it. And this is pretty important too, the idea that you can union ranges. So the idea that I could select this cell and 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 combine them into a range so that I can work with them together and just say dot color is equal to that. That's pretty cool. The other important thing is using the find function here. It's got a lot of parameters, but if you're careful enough, you can get it to work, and then you can pull addresses from the search result and so on. And the other important thing here is the fact that we did a for loop to search multiple times, but the critical part of that is to determine how many times, and that's what this is for. We search this column to say how many 422s are in here, so we know how many times to search. If you're curious about how does it know to go from this 422 to this 422, that is just the functionality of the find function. So if you do Control F and you do find 422, you do find next, it will keep going. It will keep going from one to the next. So that's how it knows. It's just the functionality of the find function. And yeah, that's basically it. So to sum up again, let me just copy this down, and let me do highlight duplicates, and just remind you again of what this function does, what this subroutine does. I'm going to clear this out. So the subroutine again, it takes 3 columns and it considers them as to be factors to determine a duplicate. If there is a duplicate like this and like this, then it's going to highlight the duplicate. So that's all this subroutine does. I'm going to save this, and in another video I'll show you how to sort of duplicate what they're doing here, which is removing duplicates. I'm going to put that in another video to show you how to actually find a duplicate and delete the row. I'll show you how to do that. It's much easier than what we did here. This is a pretty complex subroutine, just because there's a lot of stuff going on. You have to do this for loop and then this for loop, and then you have if statements with appended values, and there's a lot of stuff going on here. So hopefully you can understand it. If you have questions, email me. What I'm going to do is take all this code and upload the workbook to excelvbasequel.com, and this is where you can download the workbook. You can watch all the videos. Again, put your email in here, and I'll send you an email when we put up free videos. And contact me here if you have any questions about this or anything else. So I will talk to you soon. Until next video. Thanks.